The wind whispered warnings through the pines as Brian Coulter tightened the final strap on his daughter's pack. June stood quietly beside him, eyes fixed on the white peak looming in the distance. Mt. Hooker. For most people, it was a place of danger. For Brian, it was ritual. Ready, kiddo? He asked, trying to force a lightness into his voice. June didn't answer right away. She stared at the trailhead sign, worn from decades of snow and sun. Mt. Hooker, not maintained past this point. Proceed with caution. Are we really doing this? She finally asked. Brian smiled. It's tradition. One last climb before you grow up too fast. He didn't say what he was really thinking, that this might be the last time he had her all to himself. She was slipping away, through therapy, through Naomi's court motions, through adolescence. He needed this trip. They disappeared into the timberline, like two ghosts swallowed by shadow. The Coulters were expected back in 3 days. When the 4th passed without a signal, concern gave way to urgency. By day 5, the Fremont County Sheriff's Office dispatched a rescue team. 2 snowstorms had already passed over the range. It's not unusual, a ranger told local reporters. Ryan knows that mountain better than most. They're probably hunkered down somewhere. But days became weeks. No footprints, no gear, no GPS pings, nothing. It was like the mountain had swallowed them whole. At the school, June's locker was taped shut with yellow ribbon. Her best friend Lila wept during homeroom and whispered. She said she didn't want to go. She told me something weird. When pressed, Lila wouldn't elaborate. The community was divided. Some saw Brian as a seasoned guide, a loving father taken by bad luck. Others weren't so sure. Naomi Coulter hadn't spoken to Brian in 2 years. Their divorce had been bitter, riddled with accusations. At a candlelight vigil, Naomi didn't speak. She stood stiffly in the back, arms crossed, ignoring the prayers and platitudes. When reporters approached, she gave a single comment. He never should have had her in the first place. In an old video posted a month before the trip, Brian and June stood side by side outside a ranger station. He held the camera. She smiled. Weakly, say hi to the folks, June bug. Brian teased. Hi, she mumbled, brushing her hair from her eyes. She's thrilled. He laughed. There was something odd in the way she looked at him, something tight around the eyes, not fear. Exactly. More like weariness. 2 weeks into the investigation, a small team of experienced climbers traced what they believed could have been Brian's planned route. It was risky, remote, and nearly vertical in places. They found remnants of someone's old fire pit at the 8,000-foot mark, too old to be recent. No other evidence emerged. They're gone. One rescuer admitted in a private debrief. That mountain doesn't give second chances. The official report called it a presumed weather-related disappearance. The case went cold. Donations to the search effort dried up. So did the news coverage. By year's end, Brian and June were 2 more names in the ledger of wilderness ghosts. The mountain, meanwhile, stood indifferent. Wind carved valleys deeper. Snow reclaimed every trail. Nature had never been kind. But it was cruelest when it remembered nothing. 10 years later, in a remote Facebook group for solo hikers, a user posted an image, a faded trail marker near Mt. Hooker. Behind it, a tarp, blue, weather-beaten, and unmistakably man-made, peeked out beneath a ridge. Spotted this today while on the east face. Didn't match any mapped camps. Thought it was odd. It got 6 likes. One user commented, looks like a ghost tent. Another replied, someone should report that. Mt. Hooker, that's where that dad and girl vanished years ago, right? No one responded. But 2 weeks later, a ranger on patrol diverted to the coordinates out of curiosity. What he found would turn whispers into headlines. The tent was still standing. Folded blankets, a thermos, 2 sleeping bags, a broken compass placed carefully beside a folded map. No blood, no bodies. Just time, perfectly preserved, like they'd stepped out for a moment and never came back. Back in town, Naomi Coulter received the call she never thought would come. We found something. The ranger said, it's untouched. You should come. She stared at the phone. Her fingers trembled. June, she whispered, voice cracking. Naomi Coulter hadn't cried in 11 years. Not when the search parties stopped. Not when the national news cycle moved on. Not even when the memorial plaque with her daughter's name was bolted into the stone at the base of Mt. Hooker. But now, holding the phone to her ear, staring at the ranger's trembling voice echoing out of nowhere, her hands shook. Not from grief, from fury. "You're telling me they found the camp," she said. Her voice clipped. "It's intact, ma'am. Like it was left last week. Was there," she swallowed hard, "anything human?" "No remains. But it looks strange. Preserved." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "No, not strange. Calculated." Inside her small, tightly arranged home, Naomi walked over to the bookshelf where June's school picture still sat. 14, maybe 15. Hazel eyes like hers, a smile that barely reached the corners. Naomi had always hated that photo because she knew the real June, the one who laughed when she danced, who hated oatmeal, who once threw a book at the wall because a character betrayed another. She knew betrayal. Naomi whispered that she walked to the back room, unlocked the cabinet she swore she'd never open again. Inside were binders, full of emails, court records, custody reports. At the very top, sealed in a plastic folder, was June's journal, or at least, what had been recovered from her school laptop. Naomi had read those entries so many times the text felt carved into her bones. "Dad wants me to himself again. He always does this when things feel like they're slipping. The mountain is his way of controlling the story, making himself the hero. I'm not scared of the mountain. I'm scared of the quiet." Back in 2014, Naomi had warned them, warned the judge, warned the therapists. But everyone saw Brian as charming, calm, outdoorsy, a grieving father trying to stay close to his daughter. No one listened when Naomi said he was emotionally manipulative. No one believed June when she said she felt like a prisoner on weekends. With him, he's a good dad, they all said. But Naomi remembered the nights June came home silent, the way she would wake from nightmares and flinch when Naomi opened her bedroom door. Now the world was listening again. Reporters were calling. The ranger's discovery had gone public. Naomi declined every interview. Instead, she drove, for hours north, toward the base of Mt. Hooker, toward the trailhead that once swallowed her child whole. She parked in the visitor lot and stood at the edge of the wilderness, hands stuffed deep into her coat pockets. A forest ranger approached her, gently. "We haven't disturbed anything. We wanted your permission." Naomi didn't look at him. "You think he just died up there?" He hesitated. "It's a possibility." "No," she said coldly. "He staged it, like everything else." The ranger led her to the photo evidence. Naomi stared at the images, to sleeping bags zipped side by side, a worn thermos, Brian's compass, the same kind he gave June on her 12th birthday, and on the tent wall, a small smear of faded red, barely noticeable. She hated the cold, Naomi said flatly. She never wanted to go. She didn't say anything to anyone. The ranger asked. Naomi turned to him, eyes sharp. She did. But no one heard her. Later that evening, Naomi sat in a small local diner near the base camp. The mountains loomed in the window beside her. Her coffee went cold in her hand. A young waitress came over, uncertain. "Excuse me, are you June Coulter's mom?" Naomi nodded. "My sister knew her. Back in middle school, said she once told the counselor something, but nothing happened." Naomi leaned forward. "What did she say?" "She said June was afraid, not of being hurt, but of not being believed." Outside, night fell like a shroud. Naomi stepped out into the wind. The mountain in the distance glowed faintly beneath the moonlight. She didn't disappear. She whispered to no one. She was erased. And yet, something tugged at her. A feeling she hadn't allowed in years. What if June had survived? The question pulsed beneath her ribs like a second heartbeat. And if she had, then she hadn't just vanished. She had run. The coffee in Naomi's hand had long gone cold when the knock came at her motel door. She opened it to find a young woman in hiking boots and a windbreaker. Laptop tucked under one arm. Double quotes. "Ms. Coulter, I'm Sarah Lynn. I'm part of the digital forensics team assigned to your daughter's case." Naomi stiffened, and Sarah exhaled. "We recovered partial data from June's cloud backup, specifically her journal. Some of it was overwritten, but there's one entry, dated the day before she vanished. Naomi's knees nearly gave way. "You have her words." Sarah hesitated. "I think you should read them yourself." Naomi sat at the edge of the bed as the screen lit up. The text was raw, typed with rushed fingers. There were typos, but the emotions bled through. March 16, 2014, 9:40 p.m. "He says the mountain will clear our heads, but I think he just wants me alone. There's something I found, something I wasn't supposed to see. She sent me a letter. Ma never knew. I never told her. It was hidden in one of Dad's old boxes in the garage. It was her. She said he lied. I don't know if I should tell someone, but I'm scared of what he'll do if I do." Naomi felt her stomach twist. She wrote this the day before. She asked. "Yes," Sarah said softly. "It auto-synced to the cloud through her school account. That's how we pulled it." Naomi clenched her fists. "Who is she who sent the letter? We're trying to find out. Do you have any idea who June could be referring to?" Naomi closed her eyes, mind spiraling. She had no contact with anyone outside the family. No cousins, no sisters. Unless her voice trailed off, a chill settled in her bones. Back in 2011, Naomi remembered a confrontation. June was just 12, silent as Brian tore through the garage, looking for an old trunk. He was angry that day, more than usual. He yelled when Naomi asked what he was digging for. Later that night, the trunk was gone. She hadn't thought about it in years. Now, the pieces clicked. What if that letter wasn't just from anyone? Naomi whispered. What if it was from someone Brian told us was dead? Sarah frowned. "You mean someone June never met?" Naomi nodded. "Someone she wasn't supposed to know existed." Later that afternoon, Naomi sat in the police station reviewing Brian's old files. She pulled up court documents, guardianship requests, anything she could dig up. A name stood out. Marla Coulter, Brian's younger sister. In a 1999 case file, there was a custody petition. Marla had fought for temporary guardianship of June after Naomi's first separation from Brian, but the petition had been sealed and denied. Marla had vanished from all records shortly after. Brian once told Naomi she had died in a car accident. Naomi had believed him. Now her chest constricted. He lied. Outside, snow began to fall in fat, lazy flakes. Naomi watched it gather on the windowsill, heart pounding. If Marla was alive in 2014, and if June had found a letter from her, then the trip to MT, Hooker, wasn't just about bonding. It was about containment. Detective Reese, the lead-on, the reopened case, sat across from Naomi hours later. "You believe June found something that triggered this trip?" he asked. "I think she uncovered a truth Brian wanted buried," Naomi said firmly. "She was scared of him, and now we have it in her own words." Reese tapped the table slowly. "The part that troubles me is this: the entry doesn't end. Like someone planning to disappear. There's no goodbye, no escape plan." Naomi looked up. Because she didn't plan to disappear, she was taken. Meanwhile, at the forensic lab, Sarah Lynn continued her digital sweep. She unearthed an image. File buried in a temporary cache folder, corrupted but partially viewable. It showed a handwritten letter. Only a few lines were legible. "He told you I was gone. I never left. I only ran when I had no choice. You deserve to know the truth. He won't like that I told you. Be careful." Sarah froze. The signature was blurred, but one letter stood. CLEARM. She enlarged the corner of the image, where a hand rested against the paper. Small. "Likely June's." "Jesus," Sarah whispered. She knew. Back in her motel, Naomi sat staring out the window at the mountain's white silhouette in the distance. Somewhere in that frozen silence, her daughter had stood, knowing something terrible. And now Naomi knew it too. She grabbed her coat, heart racing. If the Rangers still hadn't searched beyond the East Ridge, she would go herself. She needed to see the camp, stand where her daughter had stood, understand what she had felt. The silence was ending. It was a cloudless morning in late June when hikers Andy Mercer and Carla Reyes took a detour from the marked trail. The sun reflected blindingly off the snow, but they were experienced, careful, and eager to avoid the growing crowds on MT, Hooker's south face. They didn't expect to become the center of a decades-old mystery. "Looks like the ridge is thinning," Carla said. steadying herself on a patch of icy rock. Andy scanned the edge. Wait, what's that? About 40 feet away, just beyond a jagged outcrop, something blue fluttered faintly in the wind. Barely visible beneath the layers of drifted snow, and he edged closer. A tent, not collapsed, not shredded, standing upright. "Carla," he called, his voice low with disbelief. "You need to see this." The tent was buried on one side by snow but intact. The zipper was rusted but partially open. Inside, two sleeping bags zipped side by side. A metal thermos stood upright near the flap, dusted with frost. A weather-beaten compass lay neatly beside a folded paper map. A bundle of firewood sat stacked. Near the rocks, two tin mugs rested beside a pocket stove, half covered in ice. Time had barely touched anything. "It's like they just stepped away," Carla whispered. But there were no bodies, no footprints, no signs of struggle. No names, only silence. By nightfall, the park rangers had sealed the site. Photos circulated through interagency email chains, and then someone recognized the stove model, an older design. Discontinued in 2013. Another ranger pulled up an archived missing persons bulletin. Two names stared back at him: Brian Coulter and June Coulter. Disappeared, March 2014. A case long, cold, now burning again. Detective Reese arrived by helicopter the following morning. He crouched beside the tent, his breath fogging the air as he examined the scene. "It's too clean," he muttered. "This shouldn't be here, not after 11 winters." A forensics team began carefully cataloging every item. June's journal had warned she was afraid. Now, the eerie orderliness confirmed it. Inside the tent, Reese noticed something odd: a small tear on the inner lining, stitched closed with mismatched thread. Someone had sewn it by hand, deliberate, not rushed, like someone preparing a home. Naomi arrived by midday. She stood frozen at the edge of the site, staring at the tent as if it might breathe. She didn't speak until she stepped inside. And then she whispered. She hated sleeping bags. Reese turned. "What do you mean?" She always said they made her feel trapped, like she couldn't move. Naomi's eyes moved to the mugs. "That's her favorite color, the blue one." Reese nodded. "There's no evidence of recent occupancy, but whoever was here left in peace." Naomi's voice dropped, or pretended to, hours later, as the sun began to fall behind the peaks. The forensic team uncovered something buried just outside the tent wall. A small tin box, wrapped in old cloth. Inside, a hand-drawn map, two crumpled photographs, and a single page torn from a notebook. One photo showed June at around 8 years old, smiling, hand in hand with a woman no one recognized. The other showed Brian beside a woman whose face had been scratched out with pen. The note was brief. One of them lied. "I just never figured out which." Back at base camp, Reese stared at the photographs. The scratch marks were angry, dug deep, but the hand in the second photo was unmistakable. It matched the fingers seen in the partially recovered image from June's cloud folder. The one clutching the mysterious letter from M. "Naomi," he said carefully, "do you have any old family photos of Brian's side?" She hesitated, then nodded. "In a storage box." "Why?" "Because I think we need to figure out who this woman is, the one June found before she vanished." Naomi's voice was tight. "I already told you. Marla Coulter." Reese frowned. "Then we need to ask a different question." Naomi looked at him. He continued. "If Marla didn't die, where the hell has she been hiding for 11 years? As darkness blanketed the summit, one ranger remained behind to secure the tent overnight. He sat beside the dying firelight, flipping through the old compass. When he opened the back panel, something clicked free, a thin, almost invisible strip of faded film folded tightly within. He held it to the light. A woman's face. Long hair, hollow eyes. Not June. Not Naomi. Someone else. He radioed in. "I think I found her." The ranger held the frozen strip of film to the firelight. The image barely visible, just a woman's face, half obscured, one eye staring back with something between terror and defiance. Reese took it from him carefully, slipping it into a protective sleeve. "We need a sweep of the ridge," he said. Whatever this camp was, it wasn't the only one. The drone was launched at dawn from above, the eastern side of MT, Hooker appeared lifeless, wine-scoured slopes endless white, and cliffs so sharp they looked like shattered glass. But 15 minutes into the flight, something strange appeared on the monitor, a faint, geometric impression beneath a curved snowbank. Rectangular, unnatural. Stop right there, Reese said, leaning closer. Zoom in. The drone hovered over what looked like a collapsed roof, the outline barely visible beneath layers of snow and ice. A glacier technician confirmed the shape could be a second shelter, possibly older, and well-hidden. By noon, a team of began excavation. It took hours with heated drills and caution ropes. The team uncovered what remained of a weather-worn tarp and the cracked frame of a shelter structure. Built low into the rock, the entrance had caved in, but inside, time had not moved much. The air was stale, frost coated every surface. On the far wall, a heavy backpack leaned untouched. Underneath it, buried beneath debris, one of the techs found a rusted handheld camcorder. Got something, he radioed. Batteries corroded, but the tape looks intact. The tape was rushed to the forensics lab. That evening, in a small viewing room in Lander County PD, the tape was played. At first, just static. Then the screen jumped. A close-up of pine trees. A blur of feet walking. Ryan's voice, "Don't pull that crap now, June. You don't know what you're talking about." Camera jerks. June enters frame. Wild-eyed, flushed from cold, breath steaming. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," she snaps. "She told me everything. About you. About what you did. She's lying. No, you are." Her voice cracks on the edge of tears. The camera tilts. The frame catches Brian's face, too close, too calm. "You think you know, but you're just a child. Not anymore." Then, chaos. The screen shakes. A scuffle. June's voice yells out, then silence. The feed cuts to black. For 2 seconds, audio continues. Wind, footsteps crunching snow, then a voice, quieter. "If anyone finds this, I didn't run. I was forced." Click. End of recording. Naomi watched the tape. Breath held like it might shatter her. Her nails dug into the chair. She knew, she whispered. She was going to tell someone. That's why he took her up there. Reese stood still, jaw tight. "We need to talk about the she June mentioned." Naomi nodded. "Marla, then we need to find out where she is." Naomi's expression turned stone. "Or where she's buried." Later that night, the lab techs managed to extract metadata from the camcorder. The footage had been timestamped March 17, 2014, to 14 p.m., the exact day the blizzard hit MT. Hooker, one more detail stood out. The camcorder's serial number showed. It was purchased in Marla Coulter's name 2 months prior. "Wait," Reese said, furrowing his brow. "If Brian said Marla was dead, how did she buy that?" The next morning, search teams returned to the second camp with thermal drones. Beneath a nearby snow shelf to 30 meters downhill, they identified a heat anomaly, likely a body. They began digging with surgical precision. At 2:45 p.m., the lead digger's radio crackled. "We've got something. Human remains partial. Female, clothing intact. Decomposition suggests frozen immediately postmortem." Naomi arrived on site within the hour. She wasn't allowed close, but she didn't move from her spot at the rope line. Her eyes were fixed on the recovery bags being lifted from the pit. "Can you tell yet who it is?" she asked Reese. He shook his head. "We'll know soon. But if that tape is any clue, it's not Brian." Naomi looked toward the horizon, voice low. Then June saw it happen. Whatever it was, the coroner confirmed preliminary details that night. The body belonged to an adult woman, early to mid-30s. The bones of the left forearm were fractured, likely from blunt force trauma. Cause of death, exposure, and head injury. But the most revealing clue came from a bracelet on the wrist, tarnished, but legible. It bore the initials. MC. Reese exhaled heavily. "So Marla didn't run." Naomi's voice was brittle. "No, she died up there, and my daughter watched her die. But if Brian was there, and Marla ended up dead." Reese didn't finish the thought. He didn't have to. The only piece missing now was June. She emerged for only 6 seconds in the grainy, time-warp footage. A woman standing just outside the tent's mouth, bundled in an oversized jacket, her hood slipping back as the wind blew. Dark hair, piercing eyes, a long scar tracing the left side of her jaw. Naomi paused the tape. Her fingers trembled. "That's Marla," she whispered. "That's his sister." Detective Odom exchanged glances with his colleague. "Brian told everyone she died in 2006. A car accident." Naomi's face flushed with something between fury and disbelief. "He said that, but I never saw a death certificate. He didn't let me go to a funeral. He didn't let anyone go. He just came home one day, emptied out her stuff, and said it was over." The revelation cracked open a sealed vault of questions no one had dared approach before. Investigators cross-checked state records. There was no official death certificate for Marla Coulter. No cremation, no burial. Just a line of mental health facility admittances ending abruptly in 2006. The final record? A transfer to a private, psychiatric institution, one that had since closed down and dissolved into legal silence. Digging deeper, they uncovered something else, a sealed family court file dated 2 months before Marla's disappearance. With a court order and Naomi's cooperation, it was opened. Inside were transcripts from a bitter custody battle. Marla Coulter had filed for partial custody of June, citing ongoing emotional abuse and compulsion-based behavior exhibited by Brian. The court had dismissed it, citing her unstable mental state, but her allegations were detailed and specific. A passage from Marla's original deposition read, "He manipulates through fear. June copies his behavior because she thinks she has no choice. She's afraid to breathe wrong in front of him." Naomi collapsed into a chair, the file trembling in her lap. She tried to help. She saw it too. Detective Odom pulled up Marla's last psychiatric evaluation. It described her as lucid, but obsessive. The primary concern, her fixation on removing June from Brian's care. Back at the field station near MT Hooker, the investigators rewound the tape and analyzed each frame. The setting appeared different from the previous footage. The tent was smaller, the voices quieter, more desperate. The camera tilted toward the icy ledge at a harsh angle, as though someone had dropped it mid-argument. And then came the second moment, only 2 seconds long. The woman, Marla, storming away from the tent, followed by Brian shouting, "You don't get to rewrite history, someone's lying," Naomi whispered, watching it on loop. "And it's not her." They fed the footage through AI enhancement software. Facial markers matched early DMV photos of Marla with a 91% confidence rate. But without a living subject or newer data, certainty remained elusive. One investigator posed the question nobody wanted to voice. What if she never died? What if Brian kept her hidden all these years? A theory began to form. Not only had Brian lied about his sister's death, he may have orchestrated her disappearance. But then why bring her to the mountain? Why risk exposing everything? Unless she had already exposed it. June's journal entry echoed again in Naomi's mind. "She told me everything." She wasn't a friend. It wasn't Naomi. It was Marla. Was that why June confronted her father at the second camp? Why her voice shook with fury? Had Marla broken free, told the truth, and triggered something darker in Brian, in a small evidence bag? They found a second tape, undeveloped, damaged, brittle. It was inside the camcorder's side pouch. The hope was it might hold a longer cut of the confrontation, maybe even a clue to what happened after the screaming stopped. Forensics sent it to a specialist in Salt Lake City. They warned the recovery could take weeks. Meanwhile, Naomi made a bold move. She visited Marla's last known psychiatrist, an aging doctor living in Arizona. "I knew she wasn't dead," the old woman said, sipping tea with trembling hands. "Brian pulled her out of treatment, said he was taking her overseas, said she was a danger to herself. But Marla wasn't delusional. She was scared. She said he was watching her. Back home." Naomi stared at an old family photo, one taken a year before the alleged accident. Marla, with her arm around June, both laughing. Brian stood distant, unreadable. "How do you make someone disappear twice?" Naomi murmured. "Once from the world, and then again from the truth." She didn't know it yet, but the next clue wouldn't come from the footage or even from a lab. It would come from the mountain itself, and it would not stay buried much longer. The wind had buried more than just snow that day. Back in 2014, Just 2 days after the world lost contact with Brian and June Coulter, a small avalanche was logged by a Lone Ranger stationed at the Lower West Hooker checkpoint. It was mild in the records, a routine tremor, standard debris fall, nothing to raise alarm. Until now, Ranger Wallace Tiller had been retired for 7 years when the cold case reopened. He lived quietly in a modest trailer outside of Lander, Wyoming, a man long forgotten by the Park Service he once gave his life to. But when investigators re-examined geological surveys tied to MT Hooker during the window of the disappearance, one anomaly stood out: a gap, a missing timestamp, a report filed for days late. With sections redacted, Tiller's door creaked open with the sound of winter wind and wary memory. "I remember him," Wallace murmured, stirring black coffee with a chipped spoon. "Brian came to me in the middle of the night, mud on his boots. He looked broken. Said his daughter got spooked by the quake, that she ran off into a nearby patch, and he needed time to settle her down. His jaw twitched, said it was for her safety. Begged me not to file the avalanche report until the weekend." The detective's hand paused over his recorder. "Did he say why?" Wallace shook his head, only that she was in danger, but not from the mountain. When asked why, he complied. The old ranger stared out the frosted window as if still haunted by that choice. "I'd seen enough broken men to know when they're hiding something," he whispered. "But I'd also seen how panic makes good people foolish. I thought he just needed time. If I knew." He trailed off, and silence filled the room. Back at the Ranger archives, cross-referencing satellite data from that week revealed something disturbing. The quake was more severe than initially documented. Snow displacement patterns matched the exact location where the secondary camp, the one with the camcorder, had later been discovered under layers of hardened snow, meaning Brian had likely been at that lower camp when he begged for delay, and someone else may have been with him. A deeper dive into the Park Service communication logs from 2014 showed another oddity: a missing incoming call from Brian's satellite phone. A single signal pinged at 3:17 a.m., roughly 36 hours before the storm. The audio file was lost, but the log entry was there. The recipient, an unlisted emergency number tied to a private wilderness therapy organization, once affiliated with Troubled Youth Interventions. Investigators quickly followed the lead. The program in question had long since dissolved after lawsuits over abusive tactics, but one name from their employee list lit up red: Marla Coulter, wilderness guide, unlicensed, fired in 2012 after being accused of isolating a teen client in freezing conditions as punishment. Therapy. It was the missing puzzle piece Naomi had always suspected, but could never prove. Marla hadn't died. She had disappeared into another system, quietly, and Brian had likely brought her back. The team began scouring supply caches near the lower cliff base, suspecting a third person had survived there for days, maybe even weeks. Discarded food wrappers, a rusted boot, and what looked like animal scratch tarpaulin were recovered. One forensic detail stood out: the tarpaulin had traces of blood, human, female, consistent with a superficial wound or restraint injury. Naomi watched all this unfold from the corner of a sterile room, her eyes glassy as the investigator read aloud findings. "She told me everything." June's words in the camcorder echoed again in her mind. Marla had reached June, but what had she told her, and why would Brian cover it up? Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft, persistent, as if the mountain was still trying to hide something, but now they knew where to dig. Where a hidden tree carving and a weather-worn letter suggest June may have tried to escape and left behind one final message. Each tin was barely bigger than a lunchbox and rusted to the point of disintegration. Park recovery officers unearthed it beneath a thin stack of stones, less than 20 feet from the tent remains at the lower base camp. At first, it appeared to be trash, another artifact from the harsh days following the avalanche. But once they pried it open, the contents inside silenced the entire team. Torn papers, folded and refolded, smudged with time and soil. Ink had run across many of the lines, and the cold had preserved the rest. Written in delicate cursive, the pages carried a quiet desperation. They were letters from June to her mother. Each page dated within days of their last known signal, beginning just after the tremor that caused the avalanche. They had clearly never been mailed. Whether she meant to bury them or they were stashed for safekeeping was unclear. But every word screamed one thing: something had gone terribly wrong. Naomi sat in a heated trailer at base camp, holding the photocopies with trembling hands. She'd spent over a decade wondering what her daughter's final days had been like. Now she was reading them. "Mom, I wish you had come instead of Dad. He doesn't talk like he used to. Sometimes I think he forgets who I am. There's someone else here. I'm not supposed to know. But I hear her. I think it's Marla. I think she's alive. He said it was therapy, that I needed to be corrected. But I don't know what I did wrong. He said you wouldn't understand." Naomi pressed her fist to her mouth. The grief she had learned to tame over the years clawed its way out. Forensic analysts confirmed the handwriting matched June's school essays. The ink, though faded, was intact enough to trace the sequence. The last letter was incomplete. "I'm scared. If anything happens to me, it ended there. No signature, no further page." Investigators pieced together that the letters had been carefully hidden. The tin itself bore a faint impression of the logo from the now-defunct Wilderness Therapy Group, the same one where Marla Coulter had last been employed. One of the most chilling parts came in the fourth letter. "She watches from the trees. He says I'm imagining it, but I saw her face. It's her. She wears something around her neck. The thing you gave me when I was little, my necklace. He told me you lost it. He lied. The necklace, the same one recovered from the grave site weeks prior. The one found with June's remains. If Marla had it, and June later died wearing it, what happened between them? Back at the site, the excavation team scoured the surrounding woods, looking for any sign of the path June might have taken. A tree not far from the buried tin bore faint scratchings. At the base of its trunk, partially obscured by moss, a single word: help. Above it, a crude heart carved with the initials JC, and just below, barely visible under the bark's fresh growth, another set, MC, to sets of initials. Side by side, unequal in size, one above, one below, theories began to take shape. Some wondered if June had tried to escape, sought out her aunt, and confronted truths that shattered her. Others questioned whether Marla had tried to protect her from Brian or lure her away. One detail in the second letter raised new alarms. He said if I told anyone, no one would believe me. He said you'd moved on, that you told him to take me, that you were tired of fighting. Naomi felt her stomach twist. She remembered the custody battle, how bitter it had grown, how she had once yelled, "Take her then, see if you can do better," words spoken in fury and regret. Did June believe she'd been abandoned? Investigators sent the tin and letters to a climate-controlled facility for preservation, hoping future analysis might yield fingerprints or trace DNA. But to Naomi, the letters were already a kind of resurrection. They brought June's voice, back from the snow, honest, frightened, alive. Outside the trailer, the snow had picked up again. It dusted the base camp, gently settling over the past as if trying once more to bury what had surfaced. But too much had been unearthed now, where an unexpected carving in a tree far from camp reveals a hidden meeting place, and a chilling signature carved below. The sun barely pierced the overcast sky as to search team members pried a frozen boot from the thawing edge of a glacial runoff. They were nearing the end of their sweep near the southern ridge when they spotted the sole, encased in brittle ice, protruding from beneath a collapsed outcropping. The boot was clearly old, laces frayed and eyelets rusted. But inside was something far more important than they could have imagined. Folded tightly and wrapped in wax paper was a hand-drawn map, faintly smudged, torn at one corner, but unmistakably real. At the bottom of the paper, written in shaky ink, were the words, "She's here." The map was simple, a crude sketch of the terrain surrounding MT, Hooker's base camp, rivers, slopes, tree lines, and one X marked in thick pen. Above a narrow ledge southwest of the avalanche path, investigators sprang into motion. Within the hour, a coordinated team of forensic analysts, search and rescue, and rangers followed the coordinates. The climb was slow. Ice made the incline treacherous, and the rock face leading to the marked ledge was barely a foot wide in some areas. A ranger slipped once, caught only by the safety harness clipped into a line above. But by late afternoon, they reached the spot. It was a shallow cave, partly collapsed by icefall, hidden behind a curtain of dense pine branches. Inside, it was cold, darker than expected, and silent. The only sound was the wind whispering through a crack in the stone. At first, they thought it was empty. Then someone pointed to the far end, where a pile of rocks formed what looked like a deliberate barrier. Behind it, carefully laid and partially mummified by time and cold, were the remains of a woman. She was lying on her side, arms tucked in, as if she'd been trying to stay warm. Her body was wearing a red parka, sleeves patched clumsily with medical tape. Clutched in her hand was a plastic whistle, its string wrapped tightly around her fingers as though she had tried to blow it or defend herself, and around her neck, unmistakably clear in the flashlight beam, was the second locket, the same style as June's, but older, tarnished, and engraved with the initials MC Marla Coulter. She had been here the whole time, not missing, not escaped, not hiding in some secret settlement. Dead, and someone had buried her. The team stood in stunned silence. The positioning of the body was too careful, too deliberate, to be a natural death. She hadn't been caught in a storm or fallen by accident. Someone had found her and taken the time to lay her to rest. But why here? Why would June know? And most haunting of all, if June had known Marla was dead, why did she write letters fearing she was alive? A forensic specialist moved closer and noticed something carved into the inside wall of the cave just above where Marla's head had rested. The lettering was crude, likely made with a knife or sharp rock. 3 words, "He made me." Below it, initials, J.C. June's. Back at base camp, Naomi stared at the satellite photo printouts of the cave. Her hands trembled. "They found her," she asked quietly. "They think it's Marla." "The second locket confirms it," said Ranger Tully, removing his gloves. "The boots, the coat, it matches her gear manifest from 20 years ago." "Did she?" Naomi couldn't finish the sentence. "We don't know yet," he replied. "But if June found her, and she marked that map, it means she was alive long after we thought." There was a knock at the door. A young intern handed Naomi a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a small torn piece of paper found under Marla's coat. It was a fragment of a photo. Half of June's face, smiling, arm around someone now cut from the frame. On the back, in June's handwriting, "She forgave me, but he never will," where audio recordings from Brian's emergency radio are recovered, revealing chilling final transmissions and an argument never meant to be heard. Snow kicked up in flurries as the rescue team rappelled down the final slope of the glacial crevice. A week of careful excavation had led them here, beneath a collapsed ice shelf, where melting runoff had finally revealed a glimpse of fabric and bone. What they uncovered was haunting. 2 sets of skeletal remains, partially buried in ice and rock. One body was curled inward, arms wrapped protectively over the chest. The other lay a few feet away, face down, legs twisted unnaturally, as if having fallen from above. Both were wrapped in the tattered remnants of hiking jackets, faded red and navy blue. DNA analysis later confirmed what investigators already suspected. The remains belonged to Marla Coulter and Brian Calden. But one haunting question echoed louder than ever. Where was June? The pendant was what threw them all off balance. It had been looped around Marla's wrist, tangled in the fraying elastic of her old hiking glove, delicate, worn. Inside the locket was a tiny photo, June as a child, grinning beside her father. A mountain backdrop behind them, on the back, for June. Love. M. The investigators stood in silence. Naomi stepped forward and stared down at the jewelry through the frost-lined plastic bag. "This was June's," she whispered. "I remember when she got it. Her mom gave it to her on her 7th birthday. So why is it on Marla?" A ranger asked. The silence that followed was suffocating. Evidence around the site offered a partial story. One ice pick, wedged between the rocks, 2 collapsed sleeping bags, a tin cup, scorched black from a fire long dead, and under a layer of compacted snow, a crumpled page from a topographic map. The corner read Calden, a barely visible notation in Brian's handwriting. Forensic markers traced the descent. Brian's fall had not been accidental. The angle of the bones and shattered wrists suggested a struggle near the edge. Marla's body had no signs of injury beyond frostbite and exposure. It was likely she had survived longer, maybe days, but not alone. They were together, Naomi said, at least at the end. Ranger Tully nodded, gesturing to the shelter of rocks. Brian had stacked near Marla's side. He tried to protect her from the wind. That's why the snow packed so tight here. It was a windbreak. But June, Naomi asked, if she was with them, where did she go? Why would she leave the pendant? Theories flew. Some said Brian had forced Marla up the mountain, that he meant to leave June behind, but she followed. Others believed June found them by accident, maybe searching for her missing friend. And when she saw what happened, she fled in terror. But the positioning of the bodies told a more complicated story. The whistle in Marla's pocket, the second locket. The dried smear of blood found beneath Brian's broken fingernails. Something had gone terribly wrong up there, not a misstep, but a decision. And June, by all accounts, had been in the middle of it. Then came the discovery that shattered the search wide open. While examining the rock face just above the site, one team member spotted a series of boot prints fossilized in ice, unmistakably. Small, far too small to belong to Brian or Marla. They trailed off to a narrow path leading away from the shelf, then disappeared beyond a sheer drop. That path hadn't been explored before. Naomi joined the team as they traced the new route. Just under 2 miles northeast, through a sharp canyon pass, they found remnants of an old lean-to shelter, a tarp shredded by wind, 2 energy bar wrappers, a plastic water canteen, and tucked beneath a rock to keep it from blowing away, a page from a torn journal. Naomi's breath caught when she saw the handwriting. It was June's. He said she never should have come, that I ruined it, but she just wanted to talk. I couldn't stop the shouting. I tried. I ran before he looked back at me. I thought I'd go back, but I didn't. I couldn't. The date on the corner read August 3rd, 2014, 1 week after their last known contact. Naomi sat on the ridge as the wind howled around her, the page shaking in her hands. A few feet away, the forensic team gently marked the area as a secondary scene. She was alive. One whispered and maybe still out there. The mountain had kept its secrets for over a decade, but it hadn't kept them all. It was just after dawn when the call came in. A message relayed by a backcountry ranger stationed near Mt. Hooker's eastern slope. A solo hiker named Finn Marlowe had returned to base camp with a strange story. He claimed he'd met a woman, mid-30s, weathered face, calm voice, who offered him water and a protein bar, then quietly vanished into the trees. She said her name was Lark, Finn explained. Didn't seem lost. If anything, she looked like she belonged out there more than I did. The name echoed in Naomi's ears long after the call ended. Lark. Not June. Not a hiker. Just Lark. Naomi could hardly breathe as she drove to the ranger station to meet Finn. She carried a copy of June's photo from 2014, a girl with wine-tangled hair and stubborn eyes. The woman he described had the same quiet stubbornness, kind of like she was done explaining herself, Finn had said. Like the world had made up its mind about her a long time ago, and she didn't care anymore. Finn pointed to the map where their paths had crossed, a ridge near Red Rock Hollow, the opposite direction from where Brian and Marla's remains had been found. Naomi blinked down at the map. It was terrain June would have known well, having hiked it as a teen with Brian during the summers. Back then, it had all been games and father-daughter bonding. She never imagined June would one day be hiding here. But then again, Naomi had never imagined June could be hiding from anyone. At the lab, the pendant found with Marla was finally analyzed. Naomi had hoped it would confirm something, maybe offer clarity on the relationship between the three. Instead, it shattered everything they thought they knew. The DNA on the locket's clasp was fresh, likely June's, but the deeper finding came from mitochondrial testing. Marla wasn't just June's friend, she was her half-sister. A stunned silence fell over the room as the results printed. Naomi read it 3 times before the truth settled. Brian had fathered both girls, with different mothers, and he had never told either of them. It explained the closeness between Marla and June, the pendant, the handwritten letters between them discovered years earlier, filled with vague references to shared pain and secret promises. It also recast Brian's motivations entirely. Naomi drove home that night in silence, her hands trembling on the wheel. The Calden family legacy, so carefully built, was unraveling. What if Brian brought Marla to the mountain because she'd found out? What if June followed not to rescue Marla, but to confront Brian herself? And what if something else entirely happened up there? Later that week, Naomi returned to the ridge where Lark was spotted. She camped alone, hoping to hear the silence June once lived in. The wind there was unrelenting, sharp-cutting, and full of whispers. Sometimes Naomi imagined it carried a voice. She walked the trail every day, sometimes calling out softly, "June, I'm not here to chase you, just to understand," each time. The trees answered only with rustling leaves. Back at her motel, Naomi examined old photos again. One, in particular, haunted her. A shot of June and Marla on their last camping trip. They wore matching bandanas. Both were laughing, shoulders pressed close, sunburned cheeks bright. They looked like sisters. Because they were. Naomi wondered what it must have felt like for June to learn the truth. That her best friend was her half-sister. That her father had lied to them both. That the person they trusted most had played God with their lives. No wonder she ran. But had she become someone else entirely? In her notebook, Naomi scribbled down the timeline. June disappears. Brian and Marla die. June flees. Years of silence. Then a woman named Lark appears, leaving food and notes for lost hikers, vanishing before anyone can follow. Why Lark? Naomi dug through old journals and found a poem June had written as a teenager. If I could fly above it all, I'd take a name the wind could call. Not June, not hers, not even mine. Just something born beyond the line. The last line was underlined twice. Beyond the line. Naomi whispered the poem aloud that night. She felt the words in her bones. Lark wasn't a new identity. It was the name June always imagined for herself. One untouched by family, betrayal, or blood. In the morning, a ranger reported another sighting. A woman matching June's description had left a bundle of dried herbs and flint stones on a hiker's path. Tied around it was a scrap of canvas, written in charcoal, "Don't look for ghosts. They're free now." Naomi stared at the message. It didn't feel like a goodbye, more like a reminder. She folded it into her journal and stared out at the mountain, its jagged edges glowing in the morning light. Whatever had happened in 2014, whatever the mountain had buried, one thing was certain: June hadn't just escaped. She had erased herself, and in doing so, she'd become something else. Someone the wind could call without ever answering back. For days, Naomi sat in silence with the pendant clenched in her palm, the cold metal warming slowly against her skin. The DNA confirmation had just arrived. June and Marla were half-sisters. The news pierced through decades of confusion like sunlight cracking frozen glass. She rewatched the drone footage over and over. Marla's skeletal hand, still wearing June's childhood pendant, the one she hadn't taken off since she was 6, and Naomi kept asking herself, why would June have left it with her? Had she forgiven her? Or left it as a goodbye? The questions tore Naomi open in ways the original loss never had. Now that she knew Marla was alive, and on that mountain, what did it mean about Brian? What secrets had he taken with him beneath the ice? A knock broke the quiet. It was Special Agent Dwyer, eyes bloodshot and folder in hand. She might still be alive, he said without preamble. Naomi's heart skipped. What did you find? Dwyer handed her a photo. A grainy still from a wildlife camera set near the foothills of the mountain, dated 2 days after the hiker's report about the woman calling herself Lark. The figure in the image was hooded, moving fast, but the posture, the slant of her shoulders, it mirrored June's teenage frame in an eerie, instinctual way. She's staying off all main trails, avoiding ranger stations. But she left something, Dwyer added, pulling out a torn piece of paper sealed in a Ziploc. Naomi's hands trembled as she unfolded it. Written in sharp, deliberate handwriting were the words, "Tell her I was never the secret." He was, for a long time, Naomi couldn't speak. Her throat burned with a grief that felt older than the air around her. "She's talking to me," she whispered finally. "She's ready." The message was clear. June, or Lark, had been hiding, yes, but she hadn't been running aimlessly. She was giving clues, one at a time, forcing the truth to rise naturally instead of being dragged from the ground. It was Brian who had orchestrated the silence. Brian who had insisted Marla was dead. Brian who had, somehow, convinced both his daughter and sister to keep the past buried. Literally, "She wants me to know the story," Naomi said, "or wants you to finish it," Dwyer replied quietly. The next morning, Naomi returned to the ranger station with the torn letters from the tin, the map from June's boot, and the restored camcorder footage. She placed it all before a task force now reassembled with forensic linguists, wilderness trackers, and trauma psychologists. "Forget the timeline," she said. "Think like her. Think like a scared girl climbing a mountain with two people who lied to her. Think like someone betrayed on every side." The room fell into focus. Every detail they'd overlooked was now evidence. Every word June had written, unspoken boundaries. "She told me everything. I don't know who to trust," took on new meaning. Someone murmured. It wasn't just about survival. It was about taking control of her own story. Exactly. By nightfall, the team mapped out a trail based not on elevation or safety, but on emotional breadcrumbs. The cliffs where Brian and Marla were found weren't shelter. They were confrontation points, which meant June had left long before the avalanche. She had gone somewhere she felt safe or unseen. The following day, Naomi boarded a helicopter with Dwyer and a field agents. As they rose into the mountain air, Naomi spotted the path she and Brian had once hiked together. The memory of him pointing out the stars, warm around a campfire, collided with what she now knew. He'd brought June and Marla here to contain a secret, and the mountain had simply refused to keep it. They landed at the base of a rock outcropping, near the map's final mark. "She's here." It was there that Naomi found it, a carving on the inside of a fallen tree trunk, nearly obscured by moss. "She was my sister before she was my shadow." The handwriting matched June's. Beneath it, scratched faintly into the bark, "L." The silence cracked wide open after that. Naomi held a press conference, flanked by investigators, where she laid bare the truth. June was still missing, but she had chosen to disappear. Brian and Marla had hidden something from her, something so deep it had fractured the core of who she thought she was. Whether it was an affair, an abuse of custody, or something darker still remained unconfirmed. But June had left a trail that demanded understanding, not search dogs. "She's not a ghost," Naomi said into the microphones. "She's not lost. She's rewriting her ending." The public response was seismic. News channels covered the mystery like wildfire. Online forums exploded with theories. People debated whether June had suffered abuse, or whether she'd simply broken free of a life written by others. But for Naomi, one truth echoed louder than all. The silence that had haunted their family was finally ending, not with a scream, not with a confession, but with breadcrumbs, wine-carved words, and a daughter who refused to vanish without a voice. As Naomi sat alone in her cabin that night, she lit a fire and placed the pendant on the mantel. The wind howled gently outside. Not cold, just present. She didn't know where June, or Lark, would go next, but she knew this much: she'd hear her again. Because the silence, it ends here.